T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition. And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight to the moon and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the Terran Space Academy, where we prepare you for a bright future in the space industry. Today, we want to announce a historic success. The United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket lifted perfectly off the launch pad. With 2 solid rocket boosters and the long-awaited BE-4 methane-fueled engines by Blue Origin, the mission has so far been a complete success. Let's take a look at the 2 missions this launch will accomplish. The first is a memorial to the creator and stars of my favorite childhood television show. The ashes of Star Trek luminaries will be carried into deep space, including those of a very sweet woman that I was blessed to meet.
One of the most incredible commemorative memorials in human history had its origin in a promise. As the rocket carrying the ashes of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry and others soared into the heavens, Gene's wife, actress Majel Barrett, nurse Chapel and the voice of the Enterprise computer, asked Celestis chairman Charles Chafer to promise that when her time comes, part of her and Gene would fly together. Soon, that promise will be fulfilled. Gene, Majel, James Scotty Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, and DeForest Kelley, along with living DNA from Rod Roddenberry, son of Gene and Majel, will fly on the most ambitious and inspirational mission Celestis has ever mounted. The Celestis Enterprise Memorial Spaceflight will carry the Star Trek royalty, along with ashes and DNA of more than 260 participants on a mission to deep space. On board the Celestis spacecraft, precision-machined, spaceflight certified, personally engraved flight capsules will reach deep space on a rocket named Vulcan. After releasing its robotic payload towards the moon, Vulcan's Centaur 5 stage will fire, sending this unique Celestis emissary on an endless journey more than 100 million miles from Earth. Enterprise will orbit the Sun forever, carrying its spacefaring payload for billions of miles through interplanetary space. Families of Enterprise flight participants will be attending the Florida launch as VIP guests, celebrating the ultimate memorial service as their loved ones' capsules lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Celestis salutes all the participants on Enterprise flight and thanks United Launch Alliance for making the dreams of participants from around the world become real.
Godspeed, Nichelle Nichols, to that final frontier. The next mission is designed to get Americans back to the moon with the Peregrine lander.
Now let's take a closer look at the Peregrine 1 spacecraft. It's about 6.2 feet tall and 8.2 feet wide, made mostly of aluminum and carbon fiber. The 4 landing legs have a honeycomb design on the inside to absorb Peregrine's touchdown on the lunar surface. Its solar panel is mounted to the top of the spacecraft. The payload decks at the center will carry 20 payloads from 7 countries. And finally, it has over 1 mile of cables and wiring. Our broadcast on NASA TV today will cover Peregrine separation around 3:09 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by acquisition of signals shortly after. For more on the company that built Peregrine, here's Astrobotics' Olivia Chapla.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm Olivia Chapla, and I can't tell you how pleased I am to be here representing Astrobotic as the Director of Marketing and Communications. We're a small but mighty team of about 260 people. Together, our real goal is to make space accessible to the world, and today we are particularly focused on the moon. Astrobotic built the Peregrine spacecraft as part of our fleet of lunar landers designed to deliver cargo, called payloads, to the moon's surface. Over the past 3 years, I've watched the Astrobotic team build this Peregrine spacecraft launching today. I've been there alongside them during the long days, late nights, and for the ridiculously early mornings when we shipped Peregrine to Cape Canaveral in preparation for launch today. I am personally so excited to be here because this mission really marks the beginning of a historic time. The United States hasn't soft landed on the moon since NASA's Apollo program more than 50 years ago, and only a handful of countries have ever successfully landed on the lunar surface. Astrobotics' aim is to not only return the American flag to the moon again with Peregrine, but also to start regular commercial lunar deliveries to the moon's surface. Now, let's hear a little more from our founder and CEO, John Thornton.
Astrobotics' goal is to make space accessible to the world, and what that means to us is making it possible for space agencies and commercial organizations, and ultimately the individual all around the world, to access the moon in ways that have never been possible before. The big thing that we're known for is our 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one is about to launch, and our second one flies in 2024. Astrobotic already has a wide array of contracts from rovers and landers, and now the beginnings of power systems that can be deployed on the surface of the moon. So we are not only thinking about lunar delivery, we're thinking about the next step. We're thinking about rovers that can drive. We're thinking about power systems that can deploy and provide sustaining power at the poles of the moon. These are all of the pieces that we need, the infrastructure that we need to take our next step, to make the moon a place that we can sustain and live and have astronauts do science and exploration, and one day use the resources of the moon for in-space purposes, and perhaps eventually bring those resources back to Earth. Pittsburgh startups, and space startups in particular, are not supposed to succeed. You're supposed to be in Florida, you're supposed to be in Houston, you're supposed to be in LA, but yet here we are in Pittsburgh with our very first spacecraft on the launch pad, ready to go. We have more than a dozen instruments flying on our very first mission from all over the world. 6 new nations will touch the surface of the moon with just our first mission. This mission was done on a relative shoestring budget. This is a much more affordable mission than has historically occurred. Regardless of challenges, we have to continue to strive toward that future of making space accessible to the world, and to see what's possible when you come together to overcome the biggest challenge of all, landing on the surface of the moon.
And now let's take a closer look at the company that made this lander possible.
Astrobotic is a full-service lunar company. It starts with our terrestrial testing and development services that can build propulsion systems and test propulsion systems on Earth, to the sensors that make precision landing possible, to our rovers that will deploy down on the surface of the moon, to one day our power systems that will deploy on the moon and provide sustaining power for the infrastructure on the surface. Astrobotic is in all of those businesses, and we are in the business of making space accessible to the world, and the moon is just the beginning. The big thing that we're known for is our 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one is about to launch, and our second one flies in 2024. The Peregrine mission is important because it's among the first commercial missions to return to the surface of the moon. This is the first time as a nation going back since Apollo. It's the first time for 6 nations that could land on the surface of the moon with our mission. This is the dawn of a new era of affordable, routine, regular access to the surface. What that means is our nations and world scientists can access the moon on a routine, regular basis. They don't have to wait for the culmination of their career for one single super mission. They can go back again and again and again. It's the beginnings of learning about the resources on the surface of the moon, and potentially one day turning those resources into something that we can use in space, and maybe one day return back here to Earth.
Peregrine's development was a years-long process that included many people, like engineers, welders, and technicians, who designed and built the spacecraft. Landing a spacecraft on the moon is very complex. The team worked long hours to get Peregrine to the launch pad.
To be on the pad today with our spacecraft strapped to a giant 200-foot tall launch vehicle ready to blast into the heavens it's a little surreal. It's a moment I've been dreaming about for 16 years. And to see it all on one rocket, it's terrifying and exciting and thrilling all at once.
Our Peregrine lunar lander starts its journey to the moon in Florida on a Vulcan launch vehicle. That will blast us into translunar injection, heading us straight out to the moon, where we will enter lunar orbit and start our descent down to the surface. At this point, engines are firing, all eyes are tuned in, and as we soft touch down on the surface of the moon, that marks the beginning of our surface operations and our payloads deploy. As a nation and as a company, as individuals, we all persevere to overcome challenges, and we're going to continue to do that. And this first mission is just our first step, our first attempt to make space accessible to the world, and it certainly will not be our last.
And what's next for Astrobotic and NASA? You know, it seems like we're going back to the moon for a second time, huh?
It is. So once obviously successful completion of this mission, we have Griffin, which takes the Viper rover to the moon late 2024. Following that, we have as early as 2026, a tipping point where we do a demonstration of power transmission across the lunar surface. And also Astrobotic is part of the national team led by Blue Origin to take humans back to the moon. And we're part of the cargo lander system for them.
So a lot of things to look forward to.
Lots to look forward to, yeah.
And just by one last question for you, I mean, just what do you think of this new initiative that NASA has to really bring in all of these small U.S. companies to hopefully help us all go back to the moon?
This initiative is incredibly important. It allowed a small company like Astrobotic to actually deliver a lander to the moon. We'd have never been able to achieve it without that. But the best thing is it's bringing a lot more creative minds, new thinking to the table, and that will help us accelerate the technologies needed to get us back to the moon and have a robust resource and presence on the moon. So the more, it's very important for us to be there, and it's just helping us get there much faster.
Andy, thank you so much, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
And that's going to do it for us here at Kennedy Space Center.
Let's return to flight commentator Rob Gannon as we approach separation.
We are spinning down. And we are now in a 28-minute coast period, the third burn of Centaur.
At this time, Astrobotic has confirmed that we have established communications with Peregrine, and we are now receiving live telemetry. I repeat, we have just established communications with DSN and can confirm that we are receiving telemetry from the satellite.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T+1 hour 19 minutes. We just heard flight commentator Rob Gannon confirm the successful final burn of ULA's Centaur upper stage, carrying the Celestis Memorial spaceflight payload to deep space. We'll now conclude our live coverage. For more information on the Vulcan rocket, visit ulalaunch.com. I'm Amanda Sterling, and thank you for joining me on this historic day. Before we sign off, let's take another look at the inaugural Vulcan rocket, lifting off the pad for the first time. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition. And liftoff of the first United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, launching a new era in spaceflight to the moon and beyond.
And there you have it, a complete success so far, as America once again has a competitive space launch industry, thanks to the United Launch Alliance and Blue Origin, returning us to the surface of the moon. Thank you for watching, and stay safe. At Astra Pro Terra.
All channels clear.
Nichelle Nichols was a force to be reckoned with. This woman is a true hero.
She had this air of limitlessness.
She's uncompromising in her belief that the stars should be for everybody.